All right, now we're back. All right, well, first off, a big hello and a big welcome out there to everyone for joining us today. This is Navigating the Waters of Deeper Learning. This is our second session and our first virtual opportunity for doing this with you all. And again, as Lacey's been saying, the weather's been not the best and everything else. We're so glad that you're here and so glad that you're joining us. We do have a little bit of housekeeping here. As far as the session, we are recording. So you heard that little message, I think, probably come across. This will be a video that we will upload and put in a way that people can see it. So if you have to leave and you have to come back, that's one way you can revisit it, or friends that aren't here today can see it later. And we'll share some information, share that out to everyone that's registered afterwards. If you haven't already, please take a minute to change your Zoom setting. We would love for you to change the name so that we know really quickly and easily for some opportunities later of what district or organization you're with, and then your name. So an easy way to do that, you can start with the capital letters of your district and organization, and then your first name, last name. You'll probably be able to get there the fastest and easiest. There's a couple of ways I think you can do it in Zoom, but to go and find the participants button probably is at the bottom of your screen. And once you get there and see all the participants, you can find your name, and whether you see the rename button, you can hit more, and then that should allow you to change that to something else. So I'm going to give you just a few seconds if you haven't had an opportunity to do that. I'll just say also one more time, we do want to make sure that you sign in. So this is for ELA credit later. So if you haven't done that, we want to make sure to take care of that. And Lacey, you want one more time, maybe just to drop that link in the chat as far as the sign-in sheet?
I read your mind and just did. About 30 seconds before you spoke.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you for all of that. So we appreciate that. Okay. Well, with that said, I think we'll, looking at the participants here, then you're changing out. We appreciate it. All right. Well, we'll start rolling then. And I want to say formally, hi, Adam Watson. I'm a deeper learning design specialist. We also have Lacey here with us as well. And I believe Carmen may have joined our call. So Carmen's out there in the sphere as well. And our friend Rachel is not able to be here today. She is delighted, though, and definitely did a lot of help on making this presentation happen. So we'll move on. We wanted to do some community commitments for you here. We really want to be mindful that you're empowering yourself to speak up. You're mindful of taking up more space than others. You want to make sure that we're all in a participatory way, a charitable listener. We want to debate the ideas, not the people. And as facilitators, we definitely have some commitments too. We want to make sure to honor your time and end on time, or maybe even a few minutes early. We definitely want to make this a place online virtually that you can have for connection and collaboration. And we want to make sure to make the tech things as easy as possible and be more of us of handling that burden than something that hopefully you are going to struggle with. So we hope all of those things for you and commit to that as facilitators. Okay, we have, of course, this is part of a series. Our very first one was in person back in December. We are in session number 2. The virtual session. You can see that over the course of the next couple of days of the series, those are also going to be virtual, and you see those dates. And then the last day we come back being in person. So we are excited about that opportunity. And we'll revisit this at the very end as far as a reminder, so you can capture those dates and make sure that they're on your calendar and you're going to be participating with us. So going back in time, when we came to the end of our first in-person session, we had a graphic organizer that you see here in the slide, and it was an opportunity for you to think about the shifts that we shared, possibly even ones that you discovered in addition to the ones that we explicitly shared with you. And we asked you to kind of commit and say, hey, at least pick one shift. You might have picked 2 or 3 to pick as a, hey, I'd like to try this out or bring this back to my friends in a school or a district. So you filled out the first 3 columns of that. We left the last column blank, obviously, because the question was, how did it go, right? When you did go and try to implement it, what happened? How might you use it differently? So you may have not done this graphic organizer. You may have not even been here in person with our first session. All that is perfectly fine. But the idea being the same, we would love to, for those that were able to participate last time, think and reflect for just a moment. If you have the actual graphic organizer, open it back up. You're actually typing in that column. But take a moment to reflect on some previous learning that you've used and implemented and how did it go. And what I would love is if you wanted to drop that in the chat, this would be a good chance for you to do so. So I'm going to just give you 60 seconds tops and let you have a chance to reflect on that. Okay, a few more seconds. And again, we would really love to have some people maybe reflect in the chats, especially some of those that were in the first session in person. How did it go? What did you implement? How did it, what reflection did you get as far as that? Maybe you would modify it next time. And if you feel really passionate about it and you want to unmute, you can do that too. People are being shy today, Lacey.
Well, what if you didn't necessarily implement something, but what was a nugget that you took away that you thought about implementing?
There you go. Or frankly, you tried something new. I'll take that. Doesn't have to be something that the Deeper Learning team at OVEC gave you. Maybe it was something else you tried recently.
Oh, look, you got two from
All right.
good old Anchorage Public Schools, Adam.
Okay,
there you go.
I'm driving and I'm currently getting my kiddos McDonald's in the drive-through line, which is why I'm Hot Mess Express over here. But I will say, one thing I've been trying to do as a digital learning coach is to really be intentional about how I'm sharing materials and resources with teachers. And when I have discussions with them about planning, just really being intentional of like, how can we make that more authentic for your students? How can we relate that to things your school is already doing or things in your community? So that is a big shift that my approach to how I ask my questions has changed.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And now you can go safely back to the McDonald's drive-thru. We're also getting some other things. Kelly from Anchorage, the shifts that helped me from guiding questions in post-observation conferences. Good. Starting with the focus questions, says Tina from Boone. Great. All right, well, we'll move on. We've got a driving question for today, speaking of questions, and that question is, what simple shifts can I make to tasks to create more vibrant learning experiences? So we're going to be doing simple shifts, thinking of a task orientation today. So just a little flashback, and this helps you if you were in person, and if not, just gives you a little bit of context as far as what we've done prior in our first in-person session. So one of the experiences that we did, we had a student teacher. She was called Mrs. Z, and she was looking for meaningful, vibrant learning experiences. And so we had a scenario, a situation where she was doing observations. Those observations were in the form of different lessons that she saw, hence the lesson card deck picture that's on our slide. We explored that as a group, and then through that process, we looked at and captured traits that made the experiences meaningful and vibrant. What was it about the lessons that seemed to be further along, seemed to be deeper, seemed to be more vibrant? What made them vibrant? What made those things? We came up with some of those traits. And out of that work, we really came up with a personalized style definition of what deeper learning is. So that was a big important piece of the work that we did the first session and the first time we were together. And with that, I'm going to stop my share and pass the baton to Lacey, who's going to take us from here.
I sure am. Okay. So, am I good, Adam, on my share?
Yes, I'm seeing your screen.
Awesome. So since we're going to zoom in on tasks this session, we are going to look at what we would consider a transformed task, right? And so we're going to start with what we would consider the traditional task when we're trying to learn about digestive system in the body, right? And so Adam's going to drop in the chat this actual digestive system mid-unit task, but real life tasks used in plenty of middle school and possibly high school science classrooms across our state, across the nation, right? You got a great little diagram. We're starting to tell you what's on the diagram. We might even ask about what's the main function of some of them on the diagram. Heck, you might even get a flow chart like on question 7, and then a couple fill in the blanks. Very traditional kind of mid-unit task on that learning target around, I can kind of define the purpose of the digestive system. And so looking at this task, our team thought about how might we transform this task to reflect more of the definition, those personalized definitions that we developed in session 1, a la deeper learning. And so I'm not going to go into slideshow quite yet because I'm about to be going back and forth between some tabs. We thought back to our good friend McKenna. And so in our first session, for those of you that weren't able to attend, we kind of engaged in a pretty immersive experience around a friend of ours named McKenna who wasn't feeling really great. And so we wanted to kind of cycle back to that storyline, right? Had we been in person, right, we would engage in a really immersive experience around it, but we are digital. So we're going to do a digitally immersive experience around it. And so really in this kind of mid-unit McKenna task, we're trying to still figure out what's the function of the digestive system and how is McKenna's digestive system different, right? And so Adam's now going to drop in the chat McKenna's task. So this is another mid-unit task around the same concepts, but shifted. It's a collection of a ton of shifts that we did to that traditional task to make it embody more of the principles of deeper learning. And so I'm going to have you kind of bear with me as we kind of look at this task. And I'm going to talk to you as if you were my 7th grade students. And there'll be moments of like fast forwarding because I'm not going to actually ask you to do the task, but I want you to understand kind of what the task is asking. And so we, again, are trying to answer this question of what is the function of the digestive system and how is McKenna's digestive system different? And so we have been investigating McKenna now. This is lesson 7. So we've been investigating McKenna for quite a while, and we really need to pause and kind of check our thinking and check our learning. And so to check our learning, we're going to start with developing what we call a gotta have it checklist, because you're going to make another model, right? We make models all the time in science. Remember in lesson 1, we made a model of what we thought was going on inside McKenna's body, but now we know more things. And so we're going to make another model. And so in order to make that model, we have some resources that might be helpful, resources about our learning. And so in your notebooks, in your science notebooks, I want you to locate your progress trackers. It is live. A fake progress tracker is live linked on the document. Looks like this. So I want you to locate your progress trackers, right, in the front of your notebook, where we reflect on our lesson question and kind of track our progress over time, right? And so this is Miss Eccles' progress tracker, as I was my mock progress tracker of each of our lesson questions and what I thought I learned in words or pictures, right? And so you're going to pull out those progress trackers, and you drew lots of pictures on that progress tracker. Those are kind of smaller pieces to what might be our larger McKenna model. And so our goal now is going to be to put all those pieces together, right? And so as you're looking through your progress trackers, I want you to start thinking, what are the important pieces of information that would help me answer our big question? of what is the function of the digestive system and how is McKenna's digestive system different. So what do you think are important pieces? And you're going to write those down on your gotta have it checklist, right? These are the things that you think you gotta have in a bigger model. Okay. Fast forward, fast forward, fast forward. Great job. All right. So you have your gotta have it checklist. So now I want you to take all the things you said you gotta have and make a model to answer the question, how does a healthy digestive system work, right? And so as you start using ideas on your checklist, I would put a check under used, put a check under used. If you didn't use it, put a check and say, I thought I needed it, but I actually didn't use it. And look, you're going to put it on your revised model, right? So we've done several models of McKenna, and now it's kind of we're at a point in our learning where we have a lot of information, and we need to put it together to start to explain what's going on in McKenna. All right, so now you have your gotta have it checklist, and I want you to work on your model using that gotta have it checklist. Awesome. Fast forward, fast forward, fast forward. Awesome. Okay, so now we all have our gotta have it checklists. We all have our models kind of developed after that. But remember, one of our classroom norms is we move our science thinking forward together, right? So you have a model that I'm positive you feel pretty proud of. But now let's get some feedback on those models, right? Because we have lots of great ideas kind of mulling about in our classroom. And so we're going to do a gallery walk, right, of our models. You're going to leave your model on your table, and your task is to examine at least 2 other models of your classmates and provide feedback using the peer feedback guidelines. Now, look, y'all, we know that giving feedback is tricky, right? And we've been really working on it this year about how to give feedback. And the biggest thing we've really been focusing on is that feedback needs to be specific and actionable. And so the peer feedback guidelines that we've used several times before are here to help us make sure that when we give feedback to our friends, that it's productive feedback. It's not, I like your model, but that's not specific or actionable. And so this really helps us. And if you're struggling, remember at the bottom, there's some sentence frames that might help you give that feedback. Like the model said this, but we disagree because this. We think you should change this. Those are specific and actionable ways that you could give feedback on some of your peers' models. So you'll want to bring that around with you as you do that gallery walk, right? And so as you're doing the gallery walk and as we're giving feedback, there's a kind of a structure on how we're going to do that. It's one of Miss Eccles' favorite feedback structures, right? It's a take it and a leave it sticky note. So you have sticky notes at your tables, and you're going to take those with you. And as you're walking around, if you see an idea on someone else's model that you're like, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about it that way. That's so great. Write that on one of the Post-it notes, and that's a take it Post-it note. Like you're going to take that back to your model and see how you might integrate that into your model. You also, at some models, might do what we call a leave it sticky note, where you're going to write one sentence to respectfully critique one input into their model or the process going on in their model or an output in the model. Remember, when we have been learning about models since kindergarten, we're always thinking about inputs into the model, outputs of the model, and all the gobbledygook, all the processes that go on within a model. But with that leave it sticky note, you better write a second sentence and cite the evidence from our investigations that support your critique, right? We're all about citing evidence with our claims. And so I will set a timer. You're going to walk around and do some take it and leave it feedback. And once that's done, you'll come back to your model and it's going to have all kinds of posties on it. And you'll look at those posties and you'll look at the posties that you brought back with you and revise your model. Magic of TV time. Oh, great. What great feedback we did. All right. So the very last thing on our McKenna mid-unit task is reflection, right? And so in your task packet, the very last page is a self-assessment on giving and receiving feedback, right? we've been working really hard throughout the year on giving and receiving feedback. And I want us to continue to reflect on, how did you do today with giving feedback? What's one thing you could do better next time that you give feedback? And then totally different skill, right? How well did you receive feedback today? And then what's one piece of feedback that you received? And then what did you add or change to address that feedback? Okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit to kind of do your reflection. And once our reflection's done, the class period's over with. End scene. Okay. So now you have kind of a good feeling for what that kind of McKenna transformed task looks like. Looks a lot different than that traditional task. And so I want to give you a chance to kind of digest that, all of the things that were going on in that and all of the words that I just said. And I want you to really think about, what are some common characteristics? We're trying to answer this question of, what are common characteristics found in deeper learning tasks, right? And so I want you to zoom in on that transformed McKenna task, have it up in front of you, and think about, what are some characteristics that make this a transformed task from that traditional task? So not specific examples of, you did this in McKenna, you did that in this task, but more characteristics that would be cross-cutting across any type of transformed task, right? So I'm thinking one-word answers or a couple word phrases of characteristics that really make this look like, sound like, and feel like a deeper learning type task, right? And we are going to use Mentimeter to kind of collect our ideas. And Adam is dropping in the chat a link to the specific Mentimeter for this, but you can also, on the screen, you see, if you go to menti.com and use that code in blue, you can also have access to it. So it's a choose your own adventure on how you want to get access to that. But I'm going to give us about, let's see, I'm going to give us about 4 minutes to kind of look at that task and start just typing in or texting in, depending on whatever platform you're doing it on, the like 1 word, 2 word kind of phrases. And you can do that several times, right? Like type it, enter, it'll come up on and I'll project it on the screen here in a minute. But what are those characteristics that you see that make it feel different than a traditional task? Okay, so look at this. This is, the more a word is said, the bigger it gets, right? And so we have a lot of collaboration, opportunities for reflection, feedback. It's authentic, there's ownership, it's reflective, it's empowering, it's active, right? And so what I think is amazing, and it went exactly how Adam and I hoped it would go, is your list of kind of ideas and characteristics really help us answer this. What attributes enable a task to create these vibrant learning experiences for students? You just brain dumped all those attributes, right? And shockingly, a larger entity, EL Education, also brain dumped something very similar, and your attributes really fall beautifully into these 3 buckets that that EL Education has kind of developed. It's because our team really believes strongly that an explicit focus really on defining, right, and then recognizing and analyzing quality work is vital. It's often messy, right, but it's vital. And so all of those characteristics you just shared really marry beautifully with these buckets. Now, these buckets also have descriptors that go along with what we call the quality work protocol. And Adam is going to drop in the chat.
I got you. I was about a minute ahead of you, but I got, yeah.
Oh my gosh, Adam.
I have the handout in there.
He has the handout in there. So looks like this. quality work attributes and descriptors from EL education. And they put many, essentially all of the words, all of the characteristics you said can be found on this document. So it was beautiful, Adam. What we planned worked.
I love it.
I know. Don't you love it when that happens? And so I'm going to give you a minute just to kind of peruse the three big buckets of complexity, craftsmanship, and authenticity, right? Give you a minute to kind of dig into that, look at some of the boxes, read what they are, look and see where you see some of the things that some of the characteristics that you were saying appear within this attributes and descriptors handout. So you can really see where this beautiful wordle appears here, right? And so I love that you all organically kind of created your own attributes and descriptors, right? Just by looking at what we would consider a transformed task. And so the next step that we want to do is looking at those attributes, right? Think about now that we have these three buckets and descriptors to hang some evidence on, we want to apply those back to that McKenna task, right? So where do you see the shifts aligned with your attribute? And we're going to ask you to be prepared to share out at least one place where you saw a shift, right? From that traditional task to that transformed task. And you saw tons of shifts. You saw all of these attributes, right? When we did that Wordle. Now we're just hanging those on a specific kind of document that will help us down the road when we're analyzing student work and we're analyzing tasks. Okay? What questions might you have before we scoot you into a breakout room? So you'll need two things. You'll need to have your McKenna task up, and you'll need to have the quality work protocol buckets and indicators. And we will give you about 6 minutes. No, Adam, we will not give them 6 minutes.
No, we're good there.
Okay, we're good there.
I did go ahead and put the QWP traits back in there in case you needed to find that again.
Awesome.
I'm assuming that we're all good on McKenna, which is also that trait and task should be in your participant folder, which in the bottom right-hand corner, by the way, we do have that bit.ly that gets you to the participant folder for all the things that are necessary. All that said, here's what's going to happen. Because of the situation, sending and assigning you to breakout rooms, I might be able to not do fast enough, but I'm going to create 6 breakout rooms. And based on the number, breakout room number 1 is for group 1 and so on. So it'll let you have an opportunity to go to the breakout room that you need. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and create that moment now. And once we do, and once people start going, if you're like, somehow overlooked you, I don't see myself in these groups, where am I supposed to go? We'll make it work. All right. So here we go. Hold on.
Area 6. Yes.
All right. 15
Welcome
seconds
back,
till close.
friends.
Thank you, friends. Welcome back. Okay.
All right, y'all. Thank you for bearing with our pivot and our fun little tech adventure. So we're just going to take a quick moment before I pass the baton to my illustrious colleague, Adam, to do some sharing out. Can we maybe start with a group, and you can put it in the chat or you can unmute and complexity. Where might we have seen a shift in the McKenna task in regards to complexity?
So Anchorage had complexity.
Okay, Anchorage.
And we felt like, while it's definitely connected to the academic standards and understanding the digestive system, it certainly is a real world issue, the way it's applied to a real person's issues with their digestive system. And the task also encouraged them to communicate, think critically, and we know that this is a task that went on for many days, so they would have to persevere for throughout the task and sticking with it to figure out what is finally going on with this kiddo. So definitely complex.
Awesome. Thank you. It looks like group 1 of Alan and Spencer were also complexity. Can you echo what they said, or do you have anything to add?
And we only had one of each of those friends, and I'm not sure those friends made it. So we can skip to Boone, I think, to talk about some craftsmanship.
Hey, Boone, craftsmanship. Anything you got for us?
We had several things to talk about with that second bullet. Requires multiple opportunities for revisions. And we talked about how difficult that is for teachers. Often, if we give time for any revisions, we give them like one opportunity for revision and call it a feather in our hat that we gave them an opportunity to revise. But the multiple places of revision was one that we thought was impressive. And this assignment does that because not only do the kids give feedback on a sticky note, very targeted and intentional feedback, but then they give feedback on their feedback, which is a really great opportunity for them to grow in the area of feedback and revising their work, even their work and revisions. And then we saw, of course, some evidence of craftsmanship and precision, where they had didn't use it checklist to really make them focus on each part of their notebook and not just, how middle schoolers don't pay very close attention, and this graphic organizer really supported them by checking each thing. Did we use it or did we not? And even the sentence stems also gave some opportunity to be precise with their feedback. So there were a couple of other places too, but those were ones that we talked about.
That's great.
Awesome.
Love it.
That's great.
And that leaves bullet. We had some bullet friends that were in the authenticity column. Well, spokesperson, please come to the front of the room.
I'm going to try to do it until my dogs start barking.
Fair enough. That's an authentic learning moment from home. Yes, go ahead.
We talked about how it is real life and real world, because just like McKenna has a bellyache, the kiddos have had bellyaches before, and that they can really connect with that. And the creativity of it, where they can go in and look and see and talk about the different parts of the body and what hurts and what hurts them. We also talked about the feedback part is excellent. Love that you gave them probing and leading stems to ask, because that way they won't go in and say, like typical 7th graders do, oh, this is good, this sucks, which is what they would. But if you give them those leading prompts, then that helps. But it also is good for in their professional life that they'll be able to give the creative critique.
Awesome. Thank you, Bullet. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, I am passing the baton to my friend to share with you some specific simple shifts that we saw and purposefully planned for.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lacey. All right. Well, let's start with thinking a little bit categorically in terms of the spectrum and continuum, if you will, of learning experiences in classrooms and so on. So we talk a lot here in the OVEC Deeper Learning team about the idea of traditional, transitional, and transformational. And categorically, we can talk about that from a classroom experience or level, right? So you have a traditional classroom, which is our image on the far left. the ducks in a row kind of approach, those wooden desks, and we're all facing the same area, the front of the room. And that's usually the sage on a stage kind of approach, the traditional direct instruction that might happen, all those things in that classroom experience. In the middle, actually, to skip all the way to the end, we've got something that looks incredible, like something out of the 22nd century, not just the 21st century. We've got an actual operating room. We have lots of monitors and screens. We might imagine students that are around there, maybe with computers or tablets or things like that, experiencing, for example, maybe an actual surgery. They're not just learning about it in a textbook or even just watching a video. They're immersed into that experience. So it's not even what we'd consider a traditional classroom. There's no desk, right? And that's transformational. And so there's an aspiration there. There's an idealization of opportunities where students have those vibrant learning experiences, totally, fully immersed and in and engaged and doing and applying. But we recognize that there's somewhere in the mushy middle. And that's where the transitional phase comes in, where we could make a shift or two, perhaps, where we realize that we got to break up the ducks in a row in the front of the stage, front of the classroom kind of experience. And what can we do to get further along on that continuum? We want to be transformational. We're on our way to that, but we can be transitional. So like our middle picture is, we got some different types of furniture, but really the most important thing to pull out of it isn't the brand new furniture. It's the idea that students are pulled together. They're working in groups. So there's more of a collaborative experience. The idea of the front of the room is a little more tricky to figure out in the middle picture. So again, we've got to figure out ways to make those vibrant learning experiences. And so with that in mind, and thinking of these three classrooms as kind of the models, we can think our way through 3 lessons. And these are all lessons from our lovely student lesson deck that we've had and we've used a few times or 3. So in our first experience here on the far left, students are reading a novel, they're reading an essay. Is Atticus the main character, the protagonist? Is he a hero or not? Use evidence. Very traditional. Probably at some point, one of us actually did this, or all of us may have at some point with some book, with some novel. But what is a way with a simple shift that we can make some changes in that idea? So they're still reading the novel, but now they're studying the historical period of the Jim Crow South, creating maybe some of that authenticity, right? At the end, they're creating a Google Slides presentation and sharing with the class an historical figure they consider a hero, maybe compare and contrast them with Atticus. So you still have a little bit of an anchor of there's the book, but we're kind of going outside the margins of that book and making a more authentic, engaged, collaborative experience for the students. And last but not least, when you think of, well, let's really do some multiple shifts into that lesson, you can see where we get real transformational. And so here with all this text in red, you can see all these different things coming on and coming alive as far as ways where students are saying a big question: what makes somebody a hero? So they look at the Jim Crow South. There's some curated material that they look through. They collaboratively work on a video for Actism Week, and then provide to their fellow students some ways to stand up to injustice, which means they're affecting and really actually impacting their community. And the point really that you can see by the time you get to the far right is that although you might read To Kill a Mockingbird perhaps as one of a text or an excerpt from that text, you're no longer teaching the novel at that point. You're into a far different, more vibrant learning experience at that point. So in that mindset, we, in the McKenna's task that we've been looking at and analyzing, we have pulled out at least 5. You might argue there's some more, and you certainly have discovered and talked about a few probably, but the idea here is that we're pulling out 5 explicit shifts in the, as you can see, the range of the complexity, craftsmanship, and authenticity buckets, these attributes. These 5 are hyperlinked, and this is the grand moment where Lacey's going to help us out. We're going to drop a link to the slides. We've been hiding them for a bit up to this point. We're going to drop a link to the slides in the chat, and we're also going to make excellent. And then in the background, we'll make sure that the slides will now be a part of the permanent participant folder, which you're seeing in the bottom right. Again, I had utter faith in you, Lacey. I knew you were going to do it. So,
well, I don't know. Earlier we had a little hiccup, so like that's debatable.
Things happen. So anyway, the point of the story is that you should be able at this point now to find and get to the slide, and you're going to need that because behind the hyperlinks of these 5 different simple shifts that we've established, you're going to get to a particular slide of a slide deck that's going to go a little further and deeper in each of those shifts. It's going to give you some resources to give you some, for examples, and some further thought and some further things to read behind these 5 simple shifts. So this is going to be an individual exploration, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take a few minutes here. On your own, you're going to pick one of those 5 shifts that speak to you, when whatever criteria that might mean for you. Click on the link to get to the slide, to get to the resources they curated for you, and learn some more. Now, in the time frame we have, you might be able to read an article or two. So all the resources have at least one video. The bottom line is that dive in, pick what you like, pick the learning style of the media that you like, and be thinking with the lens of, okay, if I had to put my own words, what is the shift? See if you can think about that and articulate it to yourself, and think ahead and be okay with this shift. Now that I've read a little bit and found out a little bit more, how can I apply it to my own teaching or content area? At this moment, you're not capturing that anywhere special. We haven't given you a graphic organizer or anywhere to capture that, but you might make your own little notes if you like, but that is going to come and play here in a few minutes as far as sharing those thoughts. So with that in
Adam,
mind,
can you walk them through? Can you go back to that previous slide? Nope. No, that one, and kind of show them like how to get to down the rabbit hole?
Sure. So they can click on one. So let's, for example, use clear and scaffolded peer-to-peer feedback structures. If I click on that, you're going to see a new slide deck open up. This is a slide deck that for some of our friends that have been here from the beginning, you'll probably recognize. But on this particular shift, you see the shift itself. It does help us identify the example of where that kind of shift has happened in our professional development. But the most important thing, of course, is these bullets beneath. So you have an article, you have another article, and you have this 6-minute plus video right here. So that's an example of going into the shift and finding some of those resources. And in the time frame, if you can knock out a couple of those, that's great. But the idea of it is at least to learn a little bit more about that particular shift. How's that? Was that rabbit hole enough?
That was perfect, rabbit hole.
I love the rabbit holes. All right. So I'm going to bring up the next slide here. And the idea here again is take a few minutes, explore. What are you thinking, Lacey? Like maybe 5-6 minutes? Do we have it?
Yeah, we have it. We have it to give.
Okay. And we're just going to go silent, staying in the big group. We're not breaking out yet. So we will mute
You can
ourselves.
turn your screen off if you want, whatever you need to do to do your deep dive.
But we're here, and we'll give you a 1-minute warning when we're about to come back. All right. If you can hear the sound of my voice, then first off, I hope it's a pleasant voice. But secondly, you can come back to our big whole group and we can talk and go from there. I think this is going to be a moment that I'm going to be stopping to share and passing a baton, Lacey. So I'm going to
It is. I am ready.
All right. So I'm going to stop share. Boom.
Okay. So far in our short little time together, we have looked at a transform task. We have brainstormed characteristics that make tasks transformed. We've taken those characteristics and applied it to a little more specific protocol. We've used that protocol on an actual task. And then we've dug into shifts that we found in that task to learn more about those shifts and reflect on how we might apply those shifts in our own classroom. All in 1 hour and 13 minutes, y'all. Woo! So now it's time for the application phase of your evening adventure. Okay, so we saw how this might work in McKenna, right? But how might this work in something completely unrelated, like the example on the screen, right? So we have this pretty darn traditional task of students memorize the names of states and their capitals and are assessed via a multiple choice test. This is one of our cards in the card deck. This is something my daughter and I a couple months ago spent quite a bit of time arguing about as we attempted to memorize all our state capitals and sing all the songs to help us memorize those state capitals. And so this is a fairly traditional but common task. And so what we're going to do is we're going to think, how can we shift that task? How can we use the simple shifts that we experienced and then researched more about to make this task a little bit richer? We might think about one simple shift, right, that gets us a little more in the squishy middle, Or we might think about several simple shifts to get us closer to the transformational side of the continuum. But our task is going to be to how might we transform this? And the way we are going to do that is in your same breakout rooms using a Jamboard. And so Adam probably
dropped it.
already has dropped
Just-
it in the chat because he is fabulous.
I did.
You did. But the Jamboard looks like this. Okay. The very first page of the Jamboard are our directions. So you dug in to some simple shifts. So the first little bloopity of that is kind of chatting with the people in your breakout room about what shift did you kind of dig into, and really in your own words, what does that mean and how might you apply it? And then as a group, you are going to find your title, which we will quickly edit if needs be. Adam, do we? No?
I can try to edit real quick, but the
Okay.
group numbers are definitely still good.
The group
So if
numbers
you-
are still good. So you'll
if you're in
find your
group 2,
number.
find group 2 on your slide board, on the Jamboard. Yes.
Awesome. And you are going to care about this very first box, simple shifts to the task. So you're going to think about that traditional memorization of state capitals task. Think about the shifts that you saw in McKenna that we shared with you and that you dug deep into. How might you transform it? And we're not looking for a full-blown lesson plan. We're just looking for some bullets that if another group looked at your slide in the Jamboard, they would understand how you might be shifting that task. Okay, so I am going to go back to the slide deck. And you don't need to worry about the leave it and take it feedback. That's something we will do when we come back. But here are your groups. And so using the Jamboard and using the state capital assignment, your task is to first share with each other, and then how might you transform it?
And I think we just have the groups number 4, number 5, and number 6 that's left. But once everyone starts getting shuttled off and they choose the right room, we'll help
Gotcha.
anyone that's left behind.
And we are going to give you about 7 or 8 minutes to kind of break out into your breakout groups, share what you dug into, and then kind of bullet out how you might transform that task using your new knowledge. All right.
Are we ready?
Adam is going to start that breakout room. Jobby job thingamadoo.
All right. And I think this will allow me the magic of, since you went there before, it'll bring you in again. So we're going to find out. Here we go. Back, friends. Now we're back in the big group.
What?
What?
Did this something wrong?
The mothership tractor beam brought you back.
I'll mute.
Well, we're
Well, I
hoping
can
there's going to be
mute
some
you.
sharing here in the next couple of minutes, but Lacey, you go ahead. You lead us.
All right. I stopped sharing my screen, so I need to share it real quick.
Okay.
Okay, so I was watching the Jamboard, and as we were getting closer and we were like, okay, well, the time's up. We were going to give them their like 1 minute warning. There were no post-it notes on there yet. So I'm hoping that was because there was amazing conversations. And Anchorage is quickly adding post-it notes.
And
in
so
real
is
time.
Boone. So is Boone's got a note on there. And
Real
I
time,
think
you're watching it.
and
But
here
that's
comes-
why we were
There.
busy talking. I love it.
There.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to pivot a little bit, and we are going to verbally kind of share what your conversations were around, right? Which is totally fine. Or if you've got some post-it notes on there, great, you can share those as well. And so since there's 3 groups, 3 small groups, that's super easy for us to do.
Yeah.
And I'm
absolutely.
going to start with Anchorage because it's already up on my screen. And Kelly was already unmuted for the majority of this piece of the professional learning. So, Anchorage, would you like to either share with us the gist of your conversation or even what's actually on your post-it notes? We'll take either.
So Melissa, jump in if you want.
She does not.
You got this, Kelly.
She's dropping children at church.
Oh, bless.
So we had a hard time with this because we both were having a hard time finding what makes it authentic. So that was a struggle. We started with we have a colleague here who is getting ready to take their test to become a citizen. So that was our first avenue. And then we were even like, I don't know that anybody who's becoming a citizen needs to be able to recite every state and capital. So we ended up with thinking about those guides you can purchase for your children, where go see every national park, and these are points of interest. So we thought we'd have kids create a guide. They could select states that they either have experience in or an interest in to create points of interest, kind of a little travel guide, and then to pair them for review with people, starting with people who've also been to that place, to make sure that they've picked up the same things that they found interesting. And then you could do another one with somebody who's never been there, and what questions might they have.
Okay.
Love it.
So that's where we went with it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we gave you a pretty tough place to start from, right? Of there's not a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But yeah, that's great.
One question we had, like, when you do a simple shift, does the end goal have to still be the 50 states and capitals? Or, like, we just kept talking about, do you really need to know? Can the shift also be in the end goal, or is that just a must? They must do that. Period.
I think, Melissa, that's a great conversation. And actually, I think it is when you look up at the QWBs on their complexity, aligns with or exceeds grade level academic standards, right? Like that in itself might be the piece of the sieve that you put it through where it doesn't make it even past that first box, right?
That's a good point. Excellent. Yeah, because if right, I mean, it's the blood from a stone and all that. It's basically that's not a standard, so you can't even say it's meeting the standard. Must memorize capitals kind of thing. But if that's the case, but you're trying to retain the flavor of expanding the geographic knowledge of the United States, what are ways to, like you all talked about, making it a guide? Then you have some collaboration in there, perhaps. And the good news is you can only go up, right? As Emma Eccles will tell you, I'm sure.
She doesn't
any level would have
remember
made this
any of those state capitals, by the way.
Right.
But she did get 100% on the test. Thank you very much.
There you go. That's good to know. Good to know.
I mean, it's really about what does the standard say? What is it that we're trying? What's the big idea?
And and actually I'll add one more thing really quick. Just piggybacking on what Lacey said. I think it's wonderful and good to make sure we have a little bit of a gut check moment. And hang on a second, we're really trying to shift this act, but wait, do they need to know that? Like where is, let's take just a minute, look at the standard maybe for a second and just double check ourselves. That is an absolute valid point. So,
and
don't
a
just
lovely conversation. I'm glad
Yes.
you guys had that conversation.
Good. Next friends.
Next friends. Let's see. That is our good friends at Boone.
Yeah, it's interesting that you all, the same conversation is, this really isn't a shift in the task. It's to do away with the task and figure out a different way to look at it.
Yeah.
Interesting. As a middle school principal and a former social studies teacher, my sixth grade teacher wanted them to memorize the states and capitals. And the first thing we did is show me where it is in the standards. And so then we started to talk about compare and contrast the different regions based upon culture or different things like that. So
it must be a sixth grade thing, Bill, because my daughter's in sixth grade. Like she memorized it. She is in sixth grade.
Asinine. And to be honest, this is going to carry on a conversation. I had my wife who was higher up at a publishing company take a states and capitals test. And she didn't do very well. And so I took it back to the sixth grade teacher and said, listen, my wife makes more money than I ever thought about making, and she failed your test.
That's
So tell
excellent.
me, why is it important that they know this?
That's an
And
excellent
so,
point.
yeah, it was a great conversation. And so we really struggled with, all right, how do we take this maybe in a different way? And so we thought about being a cartologist on an adventure and map out that journey as we went through westward expansion, visiting those capitals. And then also, you know, how we interact with our geography. Like for us, why is Frankfurt our capital? That's a great question, I think, to ask students. Is there geographical reasons that it's our capital versus Lexington or Louisville? Because it sits on a river? Well, what are those reasons? And then you could build on that. But that's kind of where we started and where we ended.
I love that. I love think of the driving question of what makes a good capital. Now, in that form and process, you may be looking at the capitals, getting some thoughts and research and all that stuff, if you are so inclined. But yeah, it's a completely different thing. I love it.
That's the bigger idea too. Why do people settle where they do?
Exactly.
And what does the environment have to do with that? What's the so what? I think we always have to think about what is the big idea here that we want kids to take away from this. They're not going to remember the discrete things that we've had them study for so long. You know, what's the big idea?
I love it. Well, we do have some friends from Bullet we got some post-its. So let's finish with them.
Bullet started adding some posties. Love it.
Yeah.
All right, Bullet friends. Who's your talker?
Keith, do you want to, since it was your idea?
Sure.
Mm.
Just one of the things that we talked about, like everybody else, it was like, well, so what? I can look this up. I probably wouldn't get 40 states, capitals, and I've been to 38 of them. So, I mean, you know, how do we make this seemingly useless rote memorization thing and give it some meaning? And my thing was, you can either go coast to coast or border to border using the interstate road system. How many capitals can you get to? And once you get to one, what's there to do there? And then you've got a budget, you know, you've got a car that will, you know, you're driving in a van that gets 300 miles to a tank of gas. So how much gas is it going to take you? You eat $10 worth of food at every meal, how much, you know, and so, you know, kind of bring in and make it kind of cross-curricular. Not only is it a geography lesson, but it's a math lesson.
Yes.
It's, you know, all these other things. And so you can take something that was very simple and that I can do by typing a couple of clicks on a keyboard. And now it's become collaborative and it's become cross-curricular.
I love it. I was even thinking of, and then the tech level could be, you know, if you have that, you know, Google Earth, you could make like a little tour, okay, which is kind of becomes little slides you could click and present once that's made. So that's a way of capturing the journey too. I mean, yeah. So excellent.
Love it.
I love it.
Love it.
All right,
Such
Lacey.
Rich conversation around that. So had we been a larger group and had we not had the opportunity to kind of share out loud and have some conversation, we would have kind of done some take it and leave it post-it note work, right? Where you guys would have scrolled through the slides and we would have put to practice kind of the one strategy we learned in McKenna. But we were tiny and we were able to, for time's sake, we were still able to share out loud. And I even saw some people adding little posties as people were talking. So you kind of already naturally did it. So I'm going to stop my share and kind of pass the baton back over to Adam to take us home.
Excellent. Speaking of road journeys, right? We've been on a road journey today for sure. Absolutely, for sure. Okay, so just reflecting as we wrap up for today, we're thinking about our simple shifts. In our Google slide deck, don't forget that we have hyperlinks to a Google Sheet That Google Sheet has a running list with some of the additional shifts that we've added from today of all the shifts that we've done now that we're coming to the end of our second full session together. And in that Google Sheet, the last column is a hyperlink to a specific slide, which you experienced already when you did the shift exploration earlier, right? So now that slide deck has grown a little bit because we've added some additional shifts from today's session with the additional resources. So you're welcome to revisit it, and you're also welcome to review it and go back to shifts that happened in prior sessions. And this is a slide deck and a Google Sheet that's going to grow over time as we continue in this Navigating the Water series. Now is a chance to reflect. We saw the end of this at the beginning of our session today, as far as, hey, how did that go when you tried to apply it? Well, we're in that point in the cycle, right? Like we've gone through some different shifts, learned about some different shifts, thought about some different shifts from today. Lacey is dropping in the chat a link to a force copy version so that you could take this and it's saved to your drive. Let's just take a couple of minutes to fill this out. And pick at least one shift and go across those first three columns. A shift description, why does it appeal to you? And think of, in a brief bullet or two, sentence or two way, what's a way that you think, I might actually try this in the next coming weeks? Because when we come to session number 3, at the very start, we're going to ask you, hey, how did that go? So it's a good chance for you to try out something and also to reflect on it when we come back together. So I'm going to go silent for maybe 2 minutes tops and let you fill out the graphic organizer and try to pick at least one shift, but more if you like. All right, bring you back here as you're wrapping up or have finished with your graphic organizer. It's a chance for us to kind of think reflectively. And the graphic organizer is a great way of a launch pad to think about and answer these questions. So what is the next step in this learning journey? And how am I to make that step actionable? That's always the tough part with PD, right? Like, you may have some PD that's really, really good, but making sure that as the Zoom ends or you're done with the center and you're walking out the door, that something you've learned is something you're actually going to apply and try and see how it goes. So I would love for some friends to unmute and share something. And it could be something bigger than just the shifts. Maybe it's something else that you learned or from a conversation today, but share a little thought about what's next, and especially how might you apply it. Now this is excellent
I'll
wait
share.
time. Thank you.
I'm always Johnny on the spot for sharing.
Stephanie, and you're driving safely. I love it. Keep going.
And I'm driving safely, I promise. So as a digital learning coach, I feel like a big responsibility I have is helping like this transition happen into deeper learning. And I feel like right now there's a lot of buzz with PBL and everybody knows all these catchphrases, but really getting them to understand what that means without them feeling like they've got, I feel like a lot of people, when they hear that, they feel like they've got to have this like, wow, like knock your socks off lesson unit. And it's like they almost get stuck in that and they don't know how to get started. So I think my goal is really going to be like, think about the student and what you're doing in class that can connect to their life immediately, like reading, writing, math, science, whatever you're teaching. What can that connect to that they're already doing in life, and get that authenticity focused on first, and the standard, instead of it being, I've got to have this wow project that my administrator is like, wow, look what you did. I think that's where I want to start, is just like getting them to understand that mindset of it doesn't have to be this ginormous thing right from the get-go.
I love that. And in what better way than to center that in authenticity, in particular the students, right? Because that answers so many questions and concerns and struggles, which is getting them engaged, approaching it from their perspective. I love it. Very, very good. There's even some prayers going on here. Carmen said amen. So let's share one more, at least. Let's have at least one more friend share something they're taking away from today and applying it, making it actionable.
I agree with Stephanie that authenticity is kind of a good one to start when thinking about working with teachers and making shifts, just looking at our tasks about how to make it more authentic to their learning. I work with ELA teachers in particular, so one of our biggest struggles in deeper learning is getting away from the 5-paragraph essay for every assignment, and how can we do authentic writing that also assesses the standard. So I think that's where my thinking is right now.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tina. All right. Well, moving ahead and wrapping up here, up next in our third session of our series, it's another virtual session, same time of 4 to 6 p.m. It's coming up on February 22nd. Hope that you all come. Hope you bring some friends. We will only get better and better on the technical side of it. That's my personal pledge. That should be on me. I blame no one else but me. And we're be excited to have you come back and share some
we
more
share
shifts.
that load, Adam. And there's nowhere
well,
to
fair
go
enough.
but up on our tech side.
Fair
for
enough.
today.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We want to say one last time, just as a capture, make sure that you did sign in, especially if you're looking for that ELA credit. And if Lacey, if you haven't already, we're going to drop that sign in one more time in the chat, just to make sure that you do get that, so they can get the credit that you absolutely deserve. So and there comes. Great. Thank you very much, Lacey. So with that, we're really wrapping it up and just saying thank you. Thank you so much for spending some time, especially the valuable time that you all have. I know how busy you are and how tired you must be. It's long days, and it's really appreciated that you spend some of that time with us. And we're learning as much from you as hopefully you're learning a little bit from us. So thank you so much for your time today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Yeah, we really
Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
y'all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Safe travels.
Yes, safe. Absolutely.